Religion can become a poison. It can become toxic, and it often has. When you become the authority over morality and replace God, you are so dangerous. I mean, Nazism was a religion because Hitler had way too much authority, way too much power. I didn't create myself. I didn't put myself to sleep. I didn't wake myself up. This world is not mine, but someone who created me. It needs my service. So what can I do for you today?
The Grateful Podcast with Jack Wagoner presents. Subscribe. Welcome back to the Grateful Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Wagoner, and today I have the honor of speaking with Rabbi Manis Friedman, a world-renowned author, speaker, and philosopher who has dedicated his life to sharing ancient Jewish wisdom in a way that speaks to the modern world. His insights on faith, purpose, and human nature have reached millions, and today we'll be diving deep into some of the most pressing questions of our time. I'm excited to explore the decline of religious belief, particularly among younger generations, and the future of organized religion. We'll discuss the role of ancient wisdom in solving modern problems, the alienation people feel from religious institutions, and how core Jewish values can be applied to everyday life. This conversation is not about politics or division, it's about wisdom, meaning, and the search for something greater. Whether you're religious, spiritual, or simply curious, I think you'll find Rabbi Friedman's perspective both challenging and enlightening. Rabbi Friedman, welcome to the Grateful Podcast.
Thank you, thank you. What are these huge issues we're going to be dealing with?
So, I have to admit, I am not the most educated on religion or, just religion in general. And so I think that goes for a lot of my generation. So a lot of the issues I want to talk about are about just spirituality as a whole. And your bio, you say solving modern problems with ancient wisdom. And I think that's a very big issue, a very big, not issue, but just a niche that can be explored. And I'm really excited to talk about that.
Well, modern problems come from experimenting with life. Ancient wisdom means it's not an experiment. Right?
I love that. Yeah, ancient wisdom's tested.
Too many experiments. Since the 60s, we've experimented with everything. And you don't get to life by experimentation. So now the world is very much in the mood for just give me something that has always been true, not some idea you came up with yesterday.
I think that's very true. We crave evidence in a way, and a lot of spiritual practices have, if you define evidence on things that have been proven true, spiritual practices have more evidence than a lot of modern science. I think that's really interesting, seeing the shift of culture.
I read somewhere, interesting observation, the healthiest diet is to eat what your people have always eaten. So, if you're Italian, you should eat Italian food. Because how did it get to be Italian food? They tried, they experimented, and this food served them best. So why are you reinventing the wheel? You've had hundreds of years of experimentation, and it all boiled down to this food. I'll go with it.
Just because you can eat food from across the world doesn't mean that's the best way to do it.
That's for sure.
So, my first big question for you is, as an 18-year-old and a member of Gen Z, I've observed that, at least where I live in the Western world, it's far more common for my peers to forego religious practice than to engage in it. People try to find answers through a lot of different things, and through conversation with older generations or just basic knowledge of history, this seems like a new phenomenon. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective on the decline of religious affiliation and why you believe this is happening.
A big part of it, certainly not all of it, but a big part of it is just the very fact that it's been around for a long time. And when you're in the mood for experimentation, anything that's been around for a long time is already rejected. A lot of people say, oh, that's old-fashioned. Well, what does that mean? Is it right or wrong? Is it good or bad? Doesn't matter. It's old. And then it extended to people. You don't ask a 60-year-old anything because he's old. So old became unacceptable. Everything new, fresh, cutting edge, only that's exciting. So everything that's traditional, everything that's over 30 years old, you junk it. But you pay a price. You pay a price for that. You're left with nothing certain. And that's horrible. People may be having more fun, but they have to stop and take some anti-anxiety pills. Because the uncertainty, isn't that what anxiety is? I don't know what's going to be next year. I don't know what's going to be in the future. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know why I'm here. Other than that, I'm having a great time. No, you're not. You're covering up your anxiety by staying busy. Can't run away from it. So the illness of today is anxiety, which causes loneliness. I'm not sure where I'm going. I'm not sure what I should be doing with my life. I'm not sure why I'm here. I'm certainly not sure who my friends are. So even if I have friends, I am not sure. So I'm basically alone. In fact, today I think it's obvious. What is an atheist? An atheist is someone who is skeptical, who likes to have evidence, and there is no evidence for religion, so intellectually they disagree with religion. The only reason a person is an atheist is because he's terrified of being wrong. And so he can't commit to any opinion, to any system, to any lifestyle. He can't commit. Because what if he's wrong and then he's got egg on his face? So people are atheists because they're cowards. They're afraid to trust. They're afraid to believe. And therefore their marriages are very shallow. People get married thinking, I can always leave. What kind of marriage is that? They reassure themselves that it's okay to get married because you can always leave. You can always get divorced. Well, that's not a commitment. So really, an atheist simply is afraid to put too much trust in something that might disappoint. So it's an emotional insecurity. It's not an opinion. It's not a philosophy.
Why do you think that society has trended toward that?
I don't know who to blame exactly, but somebody popularized the notion that anything that is old is primitive,
Mm-hmm.
and we are very progressive, and we are open to new ideas, which is true, but I'm not sure we have found any new ideas worth the paper it's written on.
It's really interesting because studying old culture, there's so much emphasis upon respecting your elders and engaging in ancient wisdom. Religion is based on reading texts that were written thousands of years ago. The contrast between that and the values of today are really prominent. And before you brought that up, I'd never really thought about how progressivism was related to the decline of spirituality, but it makes a lot of sense.
So what went wrong? Why was it so easy to reject all the old ideas? Like almost overnight. So here's what happened. The reason you trust older people is because they remember what is true. It doesn't give them any authority. The authority lies in the truth of what they're saying. Somehow, over time, it kind of shifted into the elders have all the authority. You obey elders. And if you don't, they punish you. That is not the truth. So in a sense, the elders stole the truth. And then somebody says, I know some of those elders, they're not such good people. Well, there goes everything. So if there was one leader, one spiritual authority who misbehaved, the entire religion was dumped. Because it had all become the authority of the elder. Elders don't have authority. They have a wisdom that carries authority. So when religious leaders say, "Believe me, trust me, I said so," it's all over. You're killing it. It's not a bad thing that we question authority. But that doesn't mean question the thoughts or the principles that they teach. So in a sense, maybe it's good that our generation has rejected all authority figures. Now maybe we can get back to the truth. So we've kind of cleared the air. Now let's go back to what's really true.
When you say the truth, what do you believe that is?
That which always was and always will be.
What does that entail?
Well, murder was always wrong. And it always will be. Wasn't always, and in a year from now it'll probably disappear. Or tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
Did people always have tattoos? No. Are they going to always have tattoos? No, they're going to want to remove them. There's no truth to it.
It seems like you find the truth when you zoom out from the right now and you can kind of get a bird's eye view of history and humankind.
Or a timeless view.
When I think of that, have you ever read Kurt Vonnegut?
Not really.
Okay, so that I'd be interested. And so Kurt Vonnegut wrote Slaughterhouse-Five, and I think his books are very interesting. They take some interesting takes, but what in Slaughterhouse-Five, there's aliens that view the world, they view reality as one thing. They see no time. And by seeing no time, they have a very clear and objective view of what is right and what is wrong, causal chains. as humans, we're very removed from that. We're so entrenched in the moment that, we let our emotions get the best of us. We think about these small problems as such large problems. How do we combat that? How do we see the truth when we're so engulfed in the problems of our everyday life?
Yeah, good question. But I was talking to this guy, and he says, rather arrogant, and he says, I don't need God to tell me what's right and what's wrong. I know right from wrong. I said, so give me an example of what you know to be wrong. He says, murder. I said, did you think of that yourself? I said, is that an original idea you came up with one day, or have you heard that before? Like, try to come up with a virtue that hasn't been around forever, and then try to come up with a sin that hasn't been a sin forever. You can't. So we've read the Ten Commandments so many times we think we made it up. So can you be moral without God? Well, now you can't. Just quote the Ten Commandments and erase God's name at the bottom. So you can plagiarize morality. You can't invent it. Like, for example, most people who are critical of the Bible is because the Bible allows slavery. How immoral. No, you can allow slavery if you're moral. People who are not moral cannot have slaves because they'll abuse them. So we're not superior, we're inferior, and that's why today we cannot have slaves.
I've never heard
You know
that
that
before.
one of the rules in the Torah, when you have a slave, you're not allowed to ask the slave to do something you don't really need done, because that's mental cruelty.
So in the Torah's version of slavery, your slaves have to do only that which you cannot.
No, you can do it, but you need it done. So, for example, and this is the example given, you're not allowed to ask a slave to boil water if you don't need boiled water. Not because it's difficult labor, it's mental cruelty. You ask me to make you eggs and then you don't eat it. You're not allowed to do that. Because at least give me the satisfaction of having done something meaningful. In other words, only moral people can have slaves. So the fact that we will not have slaves is because we're not that moral.
That goes against a lot of what is like you saying that is very counter to what I've been told my entire life. And that's
That's what I get
interesting.
the big bucks for.
Yeah. um so that leads me into a question that I've heard I've heard a lot of different perspectives on. So this this is a little controversial, but with my non-biased view, I see you can never have a non-biased view, but in my attempt to have an unbiased view, I see all of the great things that religion has done for society. Society has been built upon religion. Without religion, I don't know what society would be. I mean, There was a recent study done by the Pew Research Center, and in modern America, active participants of religion are much more likely to be happy, much more likely to feel a sense of community and take part in their community, 15% more likely to vote. All of these things that religion is directly responsible for. But there have also been many people who criticize religion in saying that it is the largest cause of violence. George Washington said, religious controversies are always productive of more acrimony and irreconcilable. Wow. I cannot talk today, Rabbi Friedman. I'm sorry. Irreconcilable hatreds than those which spring from any other cause. So, my question for you is, from an objective point of view, how do you weigh these two things? These criticisms of great violence and the cause of a lot of positivity. How do we balance these?
I think religion can become a poison. It can become toxic, and it often has. When you become the authority over morality and replace God, you are so dangerous. I mean, Nazism was a religion because Hitler had way too much authority, way too much power. Of course, he replaced God. So it's always, I mean, religious people have to always be checking themselves. Am I really representing God? Or am I off on my own adventure and my own ambitions and my own sick ideas because all this power has gotten to me? So the most significant statement in the Torah, as far as I'm concerned, in the 5th book, in other words, after all Moses did for 4 out of the 5 books, he was everything. He was the leader. He was in charge. He told people right from wrong, and he was the hero, and he fought all the battles, and he was everything. And then at the end, it says, and Moshe was the most humble man on the face of the earth. If you lose that humility, you're a monster. So religion itself is a mixed bag. God is always good. We need to be serving God, not serving a religion. So, for example, going back to the Nazis, Nazism was a religion. It had every characteristic of a religion. So can you blame the average Nazi for killing people? They were following orders in their religion. Poor excuse. Because you don't worship religion, you worship God. And God never said it's okay to kill. Murder.
That's really interesting. That comes back to the beginning of our discussion where we talked about questioning authority but losing sight of God. I think that provides almost an answer, a clear picture for why society is going in the direction it is, because people are maybe loyal to their religions or their factions, whatever their religions are, even if it's atheism, but they're not loyal to. They're losing sight of what they should be loyal to.
So if somebody preaches, thou shalt not murder, don't ever kill anybody, don't have a gun, don't carry a knife, don't lose your temper, don't ever kill anybody. And then you find out that he himself had killed a few people. Are you going to say, oh, so when he said not to kill people, that was wrong? There's nothing wrong with killing people. Can you separate the guy from the principle?
It's very difficult.
Yes. But that's because we think the guy is speaking on his own authority. So if he no longer has authority, then everything he says goes out the window. But the only reason anyone ever listened to him and considered him an authority is because he was quoting God, just not practicing what he preached. So because the guy's no good doesn't mean God is no good. So the trick is to kind of discern the truth no matter who's saying it. Because it's not about the guy who says it, it's about the truth being true.
You have to separate people's ideas from the person themselves.
Well, the ideas have to be much bigger than any person.
Right, they're not their ideas. They're their truth. They're bigger than anybody. Interesting.
So it's a good thing. In today's generation, we don't have any sacred cows. Like for many, many years, if you were living in a country, you had to be loyal to the country, you had to be patriotic. So whatever the government said was sacred. And if you doubted the government, you were a traitor and they killed you. So you weren't allowed to be critical of a government. Well, those days are gone. Now we can hardly respect anybody in government. We really come a long way on that one.
That's true.
But the same was true with religious authority. You weren't allowed to doubt. You weren't allowed to question. But today, if the Pope says something you don't agree with, you call him out on it. Is that good or bad? I think it's good. Now, even if you're the Pope, you got to be careful what you say, because people are not going to just buy it on your own authority. So that's a good development. So the younger generation are in many ways closer to the truth, because the older generation forgot what was true.
If you're enjoying this episode of the Grateful Podcast, I would very much appreciate it if you could either share this podcast episode with friends and family, or kindly leave a review down below on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. It would help me be able to make this podcast better for you, and better for all my other listeners. Thank you. Enjoy the show. Speaking of the younger generation, while researching for this podcast, I found some really interesting and frightening, I guess would be a word, data about my generation. My generation is the most anti-Semitistic, or that's not the right pronunciation of that word, is it? But in the United States, anti-Semitism has gone up significantly in my generation. That's backwards from what it's been for so many years, but the older the generation, the less anti-Semitism within that generation. And so as we've questioned more authority, as my generation is question more authority, it seems like we've gotten away from what is correct. We've gone too far. How can we fix that?
Maybe I'm being too optimistic. And maybe being too optimistic is not a terrible, bad thing. But today's anti-Semitism that gets reported and, capturing all the headlines in the newspapers, and it's not anti-Semitism. A teenager paints a swastika on the wall of a synagogue. Is that anti-Semitism? The kid doesn't even know what a swastika is. He doesn't know Hitler's first name.
Probably true.
He's a juvenile delinquent. He's not a Nazi. And it comes from boredom and from not really having a reason to live. So the kid needs therapy, not jail. I think most anti-Semitism is that way. This is not the 30s. So, calling every little incident anti-Semitic, I don't think so. And I'm really upset because people won't tolerate a good joke about Jews. I mean, if it's a good joke, come on. Where's your sense of humor? And don't tell me there's nothing to make fun of Jews about. Come on. If it's a good joke. No, it's going to be reported as a racist statement. Come on, stop it. Not that there isn't genuine anti-Semitism. But that's maybe in Iran, some of the people. Not everywhere in the world. So today, the popularity of anti-Semitism is just a fad. People don't have what to live for, and they go from these ridiculous causes that they don't even understand themselves. I'm talking to a guy who says, I don't believe in God. I said, I'm sorry, but I don't know what you're saying. He says, I don't believe in God. There is no God. I don't believe in God. I said, I don't understand what you're saying. He says, what don't you understand? I said, I don't know what God means. What's God? He says, I don't know. So what don't you believe?
Wow.
You're so sure there isn't a God, but you're not sure what God means. In other words, you're not an atheist, you're clueless. You have no idea what God is, so you don't believe it. I don't know what that even... So he says, all right, tell me what God is. I said, God is whatever there was in the beginning from which everything else evolved. You don't believe that there was something in the beginning from which everything else evolved? Of course you do. You call it a subatomic particle. I call it the Almighty. We both believe in God. My God just happens to know what he's doing. So there is no atheist. You believe in God, but you refuse to recognize that he knows what he's doing. That's called blasphemy, not atheism. You insist that whoever created the world did it by accident. I would much rather have an intelligent God. And the same thing with anti-Semitism. You hate Jews? Who's a Jew? What's a Jew? They have no idea. They run all the banks. No. They control the weather. They killed our God. It's just nonsense. Some guy said, "You killed my God." I said, "I did. So watch it. If I could kill your God, imagine what I could do to you." What does it even mean, you killed God? What does that mean?
That's some power they're enlisting on you right there.
It's such... There's a joke that goes, the other day I was walking down the street and I thought I had found a dead ghost. A dead ghost?
Yep.
It's a cute joke. He says, I thought I had found a dead baby ghost. I picked it up and it was just an old handkerchief with 2 holes in it. So a ghost is something with a sheet with 2 holes in it, and a big sheet is a big ghost, and a little sheet is a baby ghost. What in the world are you talking about? You killed my God? Yeah, but he got back up. Oh, so I didn't kill him. How can you kill God? Especially since he's alive and well. What are you saying? And that's anti-Semitism. It's like, just wake up and all anti-Semitism will disappear.
It seems like a lot of the problems we've been talking about have this theme of people that are lost. And my question for you is, how do you feel? I think it's a really hard question, but when you wake up, when you open your eyes, like how do you feel inside, and what does it feel like to not be lost? What is the opposite of that? Can you describe that feeling?
The feeling is, I'm back in a world that is not mine. I didn't create myself. I didn't put myself to sleep. I didn't wake myself up. This world is not mine. But someone who created me, it needs my service. So what can I do for you today? The negative side is, no, this is my life. And it's completely up to me, and I can make it whatever I want it to be. So I'm waking up into my life, into my world, and I'm going to do it my way. But then I can't do it my way. So now I'm angry. And I got to blame somebody for not letting me have life the way I want it. So I start developing some enemies. It's your fault that I don't have the life I want. It's my mother's fault. It's the teacher's fault. It's the country's fault. It's disturbed. The reason life doesn't go the way you want is because it's not your life, it's not your world. If you can help out, great. Otherwise, stop complaining. The positive side to it is, if we realize we are here to serve God. I'm not here because I need to be here. I don't need to be here. I don't actually need anything when you get right down to it. But God created me because He has this vast eternal plan, And somehow I am part of that plan, and there's something I can do for him. Otherwise, I don't have to be here at all. I don't know how it happened, but that simple, reasonable assumption got turned around upside down. God is perfect. He doesn't need anything. But the human being has so many needs. It makes no sense. God, who created the entire universe, needs nothing. I, who created nothing, have a bunch of needs. Doesn't make any sense. So if I think I'm here to fulfill my needs, and of course I can't fulfill them all, I got to blame somebody. That's it. We're off to war. It's so simple, it's almost ridiculous. So, any guy who gets up in the morning and goes to work in a factory on an assembly line, and he complains, "This is so boring. It's so meaningless. This is all I do all day, every day, just as there. I'm so miserable. I need a life." You're not seeing things straight. If you're producing something useful for other people, you are making this world a better place. Now, who is going to be grateful? We all want to fix the world and make the world better. Whose world are we fixing? Not my world. So if you're doing something to make God's creation better, that's not a meaningless, boring job. You're fulfilling the purpose for which you exist, and that is to partner with God in creation and make His world a better place. So if you're producing toothbrushes, you are serving God. Most of the day and most of the days of your life. What are you complaining about? So as soon as we start thinking, it's my life, it's my world, it's my needs, you're heading for a depression. Because none of that is true. Nothing you have is for you. Nothing. You have love. You're capable of loving, so you're going to love yourself? You're so crazy. You have knowledge, so you keep it for yourself? That's so crazy. You're worth $200 billion and you're going to keep it for yourself? It's absurd. And to prove it is, you're very articulate. You can explain things very, very well. Is that why you talk to yourself? You're crazy.
Yeah.
Nothing we have is meant for us. So even my life is not just for me to live, it's for me to be able to create another life. And that's why the first commandment in the Bible is be fruitful and multiply. You have a life? Well, what are you doing with it? Well, it's mine. I'm keeping it. You're just taking up space. Your existence is unjustified. So can you imagine if everyone understood and knew, I go to work every day, I spend hours there serving God. No more depression. Now you don't have to blame anybody for your miserable existence. You don't have to hate the company and hate the corporate world and hate the politicians and hate the government and hate the what you're doing fine. So the guy who invented the bread slicing machine, he's going straight to heaven.
he served God, he served the world.
Right.
I think what I find so interesting listening to that is the similarity between the values that you just stated and the values of philosophies like Buddhism, where they say the self is not real, the illusion of the self. Everything is interconnected. You don't live for yourself. Evolution, Darwin's theory, were all built to recreate and repurpose, as you said, the first commandment. So many people argue over these things. People that believe these different ideologies are always arguing. And yet, they believe the same thing, just in different ways. I find that really interesting.
Because reality is reality, and everybody wants to put their little spin on it to make it unique. Essentially, yeah, we're all talking about the same thing. But those little differences can be fatal.
People wage wars over those small differences. I just wish that humankind could be more compassionate toward each other, foster more compassion, be more understanding.
Well, compassion can be dangerous. You can have compassion for the wrong people. You can have compassion that is inappropriate, unjustified. Just like you can love in a very menacing and unholy way. Sick love, you know? You can have sick compassion. Like, for example, there was a story in the paper many, many years ago. Some guy killed this woman's son, and in the courtroom, she kept shouting to the murderer, "I forgive you, I forgive you." That is so immoral. What do you mean you forgive him? You're not God. He committed murder. Is that an offense against you? You're not in a position to forgive him. First of all, he's got to go through a trial, and the court will decide whether he's guilty or not. What do you mean you forgive him? That is so immoral. But she was what they call today virtue signaling. You want to show everybody how good you are? You're not good at all. So, sometimes compassion can be. So we want to be compassionate like God, not our own invention or our own form of compassion. So
Do you
if
believe
God
that people...
says,
Go ahead.
if God says a certain crime is punishable by death, don't be more compassionate than God. Oh, we're against the death penalty. Be more religious than God, please. Because you're going to end up letting murderers go and they'll just kill again. Don't invent compassion. Use your compassion the way God wants you to.
Do you believe that people are naturally good or evil?
People naturally aspire to be better. Do they know what's better? Not necessarily. So you got to separate the two. People who believe that human beings are basically good think that that includes the knowledge of what is good. You're not born knowing what is good. You're born with a desire to be good.
All humans?
But the Nazis thought they were being good.
Interesting. So everyone believes they're doing good. They believe in their heart that what they're doing is good, but it's not always good.
That's
So
why
when someone
there's something refreshing about the outlaw.
Yes.
I'm not trying to be good. I'm bad and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
There's something nice about that. Like, that simple honesty.
Mm-hmm.
And those people trying to be good, they're so pompous and they're so arrogant and they're so full of themselves.
Same.
So everybody believes they're doing good. They just never stop to check. How do you know you're doing good? What makes what you're doing right? Because you think so? Because you say so?
I've thought about that before, how well, see what you said with compassion earlier. Should we empathize for the people that believe they're doing good, and should we try to teach them, try to give them education to change the way that they think? I think that what a lot of people feel, for example, people against the death penalty, um, it's often for people who had justifiable motives. So, and many argue that there is no such thing as a justifiable motive for a sin. There's no reason that justifies you killing another person. If it was morally a, let's say, more justifiable motive, let's say the person that you killed your child, do you give that person more of a chance, or are they equally, should they be equally punished as someone that killed a random person out of cold blood?
Everything has to be taken into account. There are no black and white hardcore commandments.
Mm-hmm.
A value system says anyone who murders deserves to die. Does that mean everyone who murdered was put to death? No, of course not. You got to consider whether he was of sane mind. You got to
Mm-hmm.
consider whether it was intentional. You got to consider whether he was doing it out of passion or cold-blooded. Was it a spur-of-the-moment thing where he lost his temper, or had he planned it maliciously? There's murder one, there's murder two, there's manslaughter, there's negligence. You can't you can't just be that simplistic. You killed somebody, you die. That's why we have not only a written Bible, but we have the oral Bible as well. So what was Moses doing on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights? Memorizing 10 commandments? He was being told what each of the commandment means and how it's applied. So that it's not deadly. Well, you did this, that's it, you're dead. That's not justice, that's not right, that's not God's way. That's something very interesting. One of the most devastating punishments is that you lose your portion in the world to come. All good people will be resurrected, but if you do certain sins, you lose your portion in the world to come, and you will not be resurrected. One of those sins for which you lose your portion in the world to come is suicide. If you choose to die, you're dead. And you don't deserve to come back to life. However, anyone who kills himself by drowning does have a portion in the world to come. Why? Because drowning is not an instant death. There are seconds, moments before you die, and there's no question that you regret what you did. In those moments before you die, you regret what you did. If you regret your sin, you don't get punished. That's humane. Strict laws, but humane. So everything is taken into account.
I think that spectrum is so important. And that's one of the key concepts of religion that's very misunderstood. I think a lot of younger people believe religion to be black and white. They believe it to be written because they haven't taken the time to understand the oral version of it. And so I think that could be one way of unifying people.
Yeah, knowledge. Yeah.
Knowledge is power, oldest quote ever.
So if you make it black and white, right? For this sin you die, and that's it. Those who like it are just plain cruel people. And those who don't like it reject the whole Bible. Because they can't get comfortable with that. So both extremes are not healthy. But the Bible is not extreme. It's true. And truth is always right. It's right in its judgment, and it's right in its compassion. In other words, it's livable. It's livable. You can live with these laws. Whereas if it's black and white, you can't live with it. We're all doomed.
So, what do you see as the future of the world and religion in general?
The future, which is not very far off, is the recognition that human beings don't really need anything. Because if we weren't born, we would never complain. So do I need life? Do I need to be here? Do I need to be born? No, I don't. I don't. God, on the other hand, was moved by some vast eternal plan to create this whole universe and to go through all of history. Like, his need is serious. And I'm only here because he needs me. So my only need is to know what he needs me for. If I know that, I'm fine. I can survive anything. If I don't know what I'm here for, then I can't survive a paper cut.
Understanding purpose.
being a purposeful creature, living a purpose, not treading water. For most people, life is treading water. It's exhausting. We're getting nowhere. And once in a while, a shark comes along. And you say, what do I need this for? And you're right, you don't need it. You are needed. That's a good way to sum it up.
I
Human
agree.
beings have a choice to make. You want to be needy or you want to be needed?
That choice defines your life.
Shouldn't be a hard decision.
No. Yeah, my podcast is based on the fact that people, they can either stay put or they can go after pursuing a better life in two ways. They can build upon what they love, or they can pursue success as a way of getting away from a life that they hate. And I think the most fulfilling way to do it is build upon what you love to do. It seems like you've done that.
Well, that's a blessing. We have to do what God needs from us. And if you happen to love it, that's a blessing.
Rabbi Friedman, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. There should be more people like you, and the world would be a whole lot better.
You as well. You just finished listening to this episode of the Grateful Podcast with Rabbi Friedman. I learned so much. Although I don't agree with everything that he said in this video, in this interview, I think that everything he said has a perspective that is important to understand in order to cultivate more meaning, more gratitude, and more understanding as a society. I hope you learned a lot. If you did, please drop a review down below. I would really appreciate it. Or hit the subscribe button depending on which platform you're listening on. I have another podcast episode dropping later this week. You can find it right here. I hope you enjoy. Have a great day.